So today we are going to be analyzing language. So um, have a think about what you struggle the most with when analyzing language. And you can type it in the comments and I'll address it during the lesson. So you can type it in now or as the lesson carries on. So anything in particular that you struggle with when you're analyzing language, just type it in and I will address it. Okay. So when it comes to language, the different exam boards, they are kind of looking for similar things. Okay, they have different wording. So I've just put the mark schemes on there for reference, and then in the box in the middle, I've put some of the things they have in common. Okay, so they all want responsive evaluative analysis. Okay, so is that a question? Evaluative analysis, is that what you're struggling with? Um, so yeah, Shreya, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Are you asking if you, how to, okay, evaluative analysis. Okay, I'll come back to that one. So the different exam boards, basically they want you to be analytical, they want you to be perceptive, they want you to be sophisticated in your approach, and they want you to be detailed. So Edexcel and OCR, for example, they are slightly different. They want you to look at both language and structure. Today, we are focusing on just the language element of it, and everything that we do today, you can apply it to that question for your language analysis specifically. Yeah, not your structure, but for your language analysis specifically. So I've tried to, if you want specific lessons to do with your exam board, I do offer that. Okay, so that's just some information. I offer English writing classes and mastery groups that are exam board specific. Okay, so today it's not exam board specific, it is looking at the skill of language analysis, okay, as a whole. So I have put it into bullet points in terms of what grade 9 responses tend to do, okay? And grade 9 responses, they tend to consider layers in meaning. They embed their quotations. They support their point with more than one quote. They offer both word level analysis and wider analysis, and they consider alternative interpretations of the same idea. So the example that we'll be looking at today demonstrates those things, okay? And you should be able to see how an example of how to do that. So when it comes to evaluative analysis, evaluation is making a judgment. So you are making an informed judgment. So you're doing more than just saying, evaluation is doing more than just saying, the writer is doing this, okay? You're now making a judgment and saying the writer is doing this effectively or successfully. That's an example of evaluation. But then that has to be supported with your analysis of the text, and you have to be able to justify why you've made that judgment. So I hope that's clear. And evaluation, usually there's a specific question for evaluation. For what we're covering today, it's not covering evaluation. We are covering analysis for the language question. But evaluation is a specific question, and I'm happy to do a webinar for that actually in the future, because it's a different skill, but it does entail analysis. Okay. Okay. Oh, I'm glad that's clearer. Good. Okay, so the question we're looking at today is, how does the writer use language to portray Mr. Fisher's life? Okay, so you should have an extract already sent to you. If you don't have that extract, I will be displaying it on the screen and displaying quotes as we go along, but hopefully you should have that in front of you because that would help. So when you're looking at language, you are specifically considering words, so such as adjectives, verbs, adverbs. You're also thinking about phrases, and you can be specific with those phrases like noun phrases and verb phrases. You're also thinking about other language techniques like metaphors, similes, repetition, repetition of words, because repetition can be language structure, but when you're thinking about the effect of the word repeated, then it's language, definitely. And tone as well is a language technique. So the questions that you need to be asking yourself as we read are in the box that are below with the blue text. Think about, how does Mr. Fisher's life come across? Which words or phrases convey that? Are there any language techniques used to help to convey that? And what type of atmosphere or emotions are created by the writer's choice of words and techniques? Okay. And again, because our question is about how his life is portrayed. So like I said, a copy of the extract has been sent, but it will be displayed as well if you don't have that to hand. So, some information about this text. This extract is taken from the beginning of a short story written by Joanne Harris. Mr. Fisher, a teacher of English for 40 years, works at St. Oswald's Grammar School for Boys. Okay, so that's just a little bit of information about the text. So we're going to read the text. And again, if you're watching this as a replay, again, think about those questions that are in the box. And for us right now, we're thinking about those questions as we read. You may have already read the text because if you registered, you would have got the text. But think specifically now about those questions in the box, okay, as we read. So, okay. Mr. Fisher lived alone in a small terraced house in the center of town. He did not own a car and therefore preferred to do as much as he could of his weekend marking in the form room after school. Even so, there were usually 2 or 3 stacks of books and papers to take home on the bus. It had been a disappointing term at St. Oswald's. For most of the boys in 3F, creative writing was on par with country dancing and food technology. Oh, he tried to engage their interest, but books just didn't seem to kindle the same enthusiasm as they had in the old days. Mr. Fisher remembered a time, surely not so long ago, when books were golden, when imagination soared, when the world was filled with stories which ran like gazelles and pounced like tigers and exploded like rockets, illuminating minds and hearts. He had seen it happen, had seen whole classes swept away in the fever. In those days, there were heroes, there were dragons and dinosaurs, there were space adventurers and soldiers of fortune and giant apes. In those days, thought Mr. Fisher, we dreamed in color, though films were in black and white, and good always triumphed in the end. Now, everything was in black and white, and though Mr. Fisher continued to teach with as much devotion to duty as he had 40 years before, he was secretly aware that his voice had begun to lack conviction. To these boys, these sullen boys with their gelled hair and perfect teeth, everything was boring. Shakespeare was boring, Dickens was boring. There didn't seem to be a single story left in the world that they hadn't heard before. And over the years, though he had tried to stop it, a terrible disillusionment had crept over Mr. Fisher, who had once dreamed so fiercely of writing stories of his own. They had come to the end of the seam, he understood. There were no more stories to be written. The magic had run out. So there's more to this text, but I'm actually going to pause there because we only need a portion of this, okay? So I don't want us to run out of time. So we're just going to focus on the part that we need, which is really the first half of the text. So I'm going to talk through the example. And again, the question is, how does the writer use language to portray Mr. Fisher's life? Excuse me. So I'm looking at the first paragraph only. And I've picked this paragraph because it's very simple. And sometimes when we think about language, we jump straight to the techniques and we think if we can't see any techniques, we can't analyze anything. But hopefully you see that that's not the case. So when I'm approaching the question, first of all, you read the text and then you underline or highlight things that relate to the question, okay? So you want to think about how you can answer the question, and you're thinking about the things in the text that help you to do that. So, having a look at the text, what do you think are the things that tell you something about Mr. Fisher's life? You can type it in. What would you underline as things that give you information about his life that you might be able to talk about? I'll just give you a minute and then I'll show you what I've got. Small terraced house, good, thank you. Any more? Okay, so I'll show you what I've got. Okay, again, this is an example. Okay, so he lived alone. Okay, we're told that he lived alone. He lived in a small terraced house. He did not own a car. Good. I didn't underline that one, but that's a good one that you could have. I underlined weekend marking and then usually 2 or 3 stacks of books. Okay, so I think about things that actually give me information that I can answer the question with. I'm emphasizing that because sometimes people tend to look for the language techniques first, even though they're not actually telling us anything. So you want to make sure that whatever you underline helps you actually links with the question itself. Okay, because yes, language is important. It isn't the question, but also the question has a specific focus that you have to make sure you're addressing. Okay, and then the next thing I've done is thought about what those things that I've underlined tell me about his life or suggest about his life. Okay, so I've written that they suggest that maybe his life was mundane. Okay, mundane meaning boring, nothing really happens. Uneventful, again, not much is happening. Lonely, limited. Okay, so those are some of the things that I understand from what I've underlined. And then now that I have know that I understand the text and I understand the aspects of the text that give me something to talk about, I'm now going to look at the specific language techniques. Okay, so notice the order. I have looked at the things that give me the information that help me answer the question, and then I'm looking at the language techniques. And the reason why I've done that is because there will always be language techniques. Okay, even if you think I can't see metaphor, I can't see a simile, if there are words, there is a language technique to talk about. Okay, so for example, the adverb alone, the adjective small. Okay, I'm also thinking there might be some symbolism with this small terraced house. The phrase weekend marking, the adjective usually, okay, usually 2 or 3. I think it's adjective or adverb. Okay, so I think I meant to say adverb for that one. Okay, so there's always something in terms of language. If there are words, there is a language technique. Okay, so make sure your points address the question first. It's going to really help your explanation. It will avoid you getting stuck. Okay, because if you just pick a metaphor because it's a metaphor, now you have to think, okay, how does this metaphor answer the question? And then sometimes you're having to make things up. Okay, you don't want to do that. You want to actually make sure that your points link with the question, and then you think about the impression, and then you think about what words or what techniques give you that impression. Okay, so I've got my points. Okay, now in those bullet points I've got my language techniques. Now my example paragraph reads, the writer portrays Mr. Fisher's life as mundane and uneventful through the use of simple language to describe his life using words like small, and alone. The matter-of-fact tone employed by the writer portrays an image of a simple life that lacks excitement. The adverb alone suggests he leads a solitary life void of much human interaction outside of work. Furthermore, the phrase weekend marking shows how the juxtaposed ideas of work and leisure have created an unappealing life. The mundane activity of marking has come to define a time of the week associated with fun, rest, and freedom from work. The phrase lived alone in a small terraced house portrays an image of limitation, which is highlighted by the adjective small, which has further connotations of confinement. His small terraced house may symbolize his stifled creativity, boxed in by the mundane activity currently filling his life, such as weekend marking. The fact that despite his efforts, usually 2 or 3 stacks of books were left highlights how dominant uninspiring work-related tasks are in his life. The adverb usually emphasizes this to the reader, emphasizes this as a regular occurrence, effectively adding to the sense of a limited, confined life bound by routine and the demands of his job. So back to the comment made by Shreya, where when I said effectively adding to the sense of limited, that's actually an evaluative comment. So I'm going to highlight how all the different parts of that link with the bullet points for what grade 9 responses tend to do, okay? So you can see layers in meaning, okay? I looked at how lived alone in a small terrace house, it portrays an image of limitation, okay? So that's one explanation, okay? And then I said, additionally, as highlighted in yellow, his small terrace house may symbolize his stifled creativity. So it's looking at layers, the same quote, but looking at the layers in meaning, okay? Grade 9 responses also tend to embed their quotations, okay? And by that, I mean, we're not saying this quote shows, and then you put the quote, you're embedding it with what you're saying. So it's almost like it's the same sentence. So the part highlighted in green, the fact that despite his efforts, usually 2 or 3 stacks of books were left, okay? And the quote is usually 2 or 3 stacks of books. But if I was saying it out loud, you wouldn't know I'm introducing a quote, okay? That's how you can know whether you're embedding a quote, okay? And then support, to grade 9 responses tend to support with more than one quote. So for example, in the blue, highlighted in blue is an example, okay, mundane and uneventful, that's my point, okay? I've used the quote small and alone. I've also used weekend marking, okay, to support it. Because sometimes we can just say, okay, I'll make my point, choose one quote, explain it, move on, okay? But when you are being detailed in your use of references, that is a skill that is rewarded highly, okay? One of the skills that's rewarded highly. In orange, offering both word level analysis and wider analysis. What do I mean by that? So if you look in the orange, okay, I write about tone, okay? I say the matter-of-fact tone employed by the writer. And then in the next sentence, I focus on the adverb alone, okay? So my general point is about the simple language and the matter-of-fact tone, okay? So that's the wider technique, okay? And it portrays an image of a simple life that lacks excitement. And then when I zoom in on the adverb alone, okay, that's doing both of those things, wider analysis and then zooming in on the word level. And then consider alternative interpretations of the same idea. I missed this on this previous slide, but in the pink, we can see that I said, on the other hand, okay, it may suggest that Mr. Fisher enjoys his work and finds pleasure in duty, okay? So we offering an alternative interpretation can show that higher level of analysis, okay? Now, it's not necessarily that all those things have to be done every single time, but those are some of the features of a grade 9 response. Okay, so now it's your turn, okay? So that was the example of how I would approach it, okay, all the way up to my example paragraph. So now I want you to try with the same question. How does the writer use language to portray Mr. Fisher's life? Same question. But now think about it using the paragraph, okay, below. And now I want you to underline key quotes that tell you something about his life and make clear points about what is done, about what that is for each quote. So again, like I did with my example, think first about what tells you something about Mr. Fisher's life, okay? Don't jump in underlining something just because it's a metaphor or just because it's a simile. You're first of all looking for meaning, making sure you understand, okay? So, in those days, thought Mr. Fisher, we dreamed in color. Though films were in black and white and good always triumphed in the end. Now everything was in black and white, and though Mr. Fisher continued to teach with as much devotion to duty as he had 40 years before, he was secretly aware that his voice had begun to lack conviction. To these boys, these sullen boys with their gelled hair and perfect teeth, everything was boring. Shakespeare was boring. Dickens was boring. There didn't seem to be a single story left in the world that they hadn't heard before. And over the years, though he had tried to stop it, a terrible disillusionment had crept over Mr. Fisher, who had once dreamed so fiercely of writing stories of his own. They had come to the end of the scene. He understood. There were no more stories to be written. The magic had run out. So, which quotes would you underline from that? And what do those quotes tell you about Mr. Fisher's life? Okay. Which quote did you underline, and basically why would you underline them? What are they telling you about Mr. Fisher's life? So again, you can type in the comments. Okay, so some of the things you may have underlined are that now everything was in black and white. A semantic field of imagination, dreamed stories, magic. Okay, so you've got the good, you've got that technique, semantic field of imagination. So what's that telling you about Mr. Fisher's life? So if you think about the question, what are those things telling you about Mr. Fisher's life? Why did you pick that one? What is that? What's that going to? How does that relate to his life? So, for example, yes, dreamed, stories, magic. What does that tell you about his life now? They're like, okay, good. It does. Okay. It does. It shows that that contrast. Okay, with his current life. So some of the points that you could also make, I put them in blue. That he was bored, uninspired. He feels nothing is exciting anymore. Yes, okay, true. He does. There's a strong sense that his life lacks inspiration. It lacks excitement. And I've got the same things basically. I've also got filled with obligation and duty. He's not only uninspired, but he's also uninspiring. Yes, his life is dull now. Yes. There's a sense of disappointment, and also, again, dull. Okay. And I've got those specific quotes underlined that link with that. Okay. So now on the screen, I've just put the quotes that I feel link with those points. Okay. Black and white, once dreamed so fiercely of writing stories of his own, devotion to duty. His voice began to lack conviction. Everything was boring. A terrible disillusionment had crept over Mr. Fisher, and the magic had run out. And then finally, I'm looking at the language techniques, okay? So some of the things you may have, we've already spotted semantic field, okay, there. But we can also look at the metaphor in the quotes. Now everything was in black and white. The adverb fiercely is really key in that second quote. Devotion to duty, that's a phrase that we can talk about if we're thinking about terminology and maybe you're not sure what to say. If it's a group of words, you can just refer to them as a phrase. That is a technical term. Or this word, if you can't figure out whether it's an adjective or adverb, just call it a word, okay? But the more specific and accurate you are with that, the better. We've also got repetition or an epistrophe. Epistrophe being when a phrase is repeated at the end of a sentence, okay, or a word is repeated at the end of a phrase. And the example here is everything was boring. Shakespeare was boring. Dickens was boring. So that was boring being repeated at the end of those sentences is an example of an epistrophe, which is a form of repetition, okay? And then we've got disappointing, and we've got the noun phrase terrible, disillusionment. We've got the verb crept as well, being quite key in that sentence. And then finally, I've looked at the metaphor, the magic had run out, okay? If you've got anything else that you spotted, again, feel free to type it in. I'm glad to see you engaging, and I've had a lot of good ideas so far, so that's good. Okay, so now that we've got clear points, we've got examples, okay, and we have identified the language techniques that are being used, we're going to have a go at putting that all together, okay? So I'm going to give you 5 minutes for each of these, okay? And I've picked out some points that you could use. You've got the extract, so you can, you know, write paragraphs using your own points if you've got, you know, different things that you have spotted. But I've put the fact that he was bored, okay, and we've got that metaphor. And then we dreamed in color. I haven't put a point for that, so you can come up with a point for that one. Uninspiring. His voice had begun to lack conviction, okay? So what you're aiming for with your paragraphs, okay, try and do at least 4 of the 5 bullet points, okay? You don't have to have every single thing in every paragraph, okay? But you have to be thinking in this way, okay? And you want to have, you know, at least 3 of these, okay, in your, so aim to have those bullet points in your paragraph. I've put the example paragraph on the screen for you to work, to help you, you know what you're working towards, and 5 minutes to write this paragraph, okay? So I'll put a timer on. I can't actually use the timer that's on the screen. I'll have to just use a timer on another web page. And then after 5 minutes, you can copy and paste your paragraph in the comments if you'd like some feedback on it. But after that, we'll move on to another one and you can challenge yourself to see if you can try and write a grade 9 paragraph using the notes that we've got. Okay. So I'm going to put a timer on now, 5 minutes. Okay, so you've got 5 minutes, and if you're watching this on replay, you can do this as well. 5 minutes, write your paragraph using the points that are on the screen. If you've got any questions, you can again type them in the comments. So 5 minutes has started, and I'm going to stop talking. So go. So if you're just joining, we're writing our paragraph using the points on the screen or any other points that we may have. And we've had 1.5 minutes so far of the 5 minutes. We're now halfway through the 5 minutes. So just 2 minutes, 30 seconds to go, and then we'll look at the example for these points. One minute left. Okay, those of you joining, we're answering the question, how does the writer use language to portray Mr. Fisher's life using the points that are on the screen? If you're just joining, you might be, you can join in the next question or the next set of points because there's 30 seconds left now, but we've got another set of points to write a paragraph for in a minute. Okay, 5 minutes is up. Okay, so I'm going to show the paragraph that I wrote for this, and feel free to add yours to the comments if you want any feedback for that. Okay, so the metaphor, now everything was in black and white, highlights how boring Mr. Fisher's life had become. It is a sharp contrast from the time he dreamed in color. The adverb now signals a distinct difference from the past. This powerful metaphor conveys a sense of deterioration in imagination in Mr. Fisher and how subsequently he has become an uninspiring figure to the boys he teaches. As his voice had begun to lack conviction, the phrase lack conviction emphasizes a lack of belief and confidence in his subject and perhaps also in himself. Okay, so have a look at your paragraph and check using the bullet points how many of those were you able to include. So the author, sorry, I'm just, if you see me reading, I'm just reading comments. Teaching, making the reader one. Okay, good. You've got comments about the reader there. Very good. This is thoughts of novels. This could also show the magic phenomenon. Good, excellent. So you've looked at the effect of the epistrophe. You zoomed in on the word boring itself. You've also looked at another perspective, how it relates not just to his students, but Mr. Fisher himself. And then you have embedded your quotes as well with the magic inside of Mr. Fisher running out as well. Good. Very good. Yes. So you've got quite a few of those. You've definitely used more than one quote to support. You've got layers in meaning. You have word level analysis as well as wider analysis. I think you've considered layers in meaning as well. You have. As well as alternative interpretations. So you've got all 5 bullet points in there. So well done. Well done for that. Okay, so the next one is, we've got just 2 quotes here. Okay, so uninspired. Okay, and you could look at the adverb fiercely. You could look at a different word. Okay, and dull, shown by the magic had run out. Okay, and we've got a metaphor there as well. Okay, so this could work quite well with your paragraph here. You could just carry on because the magic had run out was your last quote that you used there. So that could work quite well. Okay, so 5 minutes again. And if you've got any questions, again, you can type them in as we go along. But 5 minutes, a new set of quotes are on the screen. Have a go, starting now. Okay, we are halfway through the 5 minutes for this next paragraph. Halfway through, 2.5 minutes to go. Okay, 1 minute left for these points, 1 minute left, and then we'll have a look at the paragraph for these points. And again, you can share your paragraphs if you want feedback. Okay, 5 minutes is up. So looking at a possible paragraph for those points could be, furthermore, so speaking of which, furthermore, it's good to use connectives in your paragraphs, okay? Furthermore, we learned that Mr. Fisher had once dreamed so fiercely of writing stories of his own, which highlights a sense of lost dreams in Mr. Fisher's life. The past tense verb dreamed denotes that this is no longer the case, which compounds this sense of loss because the adverb fiercely suggests he was once passionate about this ambition. This is encapsulated by the metaphor the magic had run out, which emphasizes the loss of, excuse me, I'm just blocking my own way here, a loss of enjoyment and creative inspiration in his life. This presents a somber picture of Mr. Fisher's life. So that's an example of what you could write for that. Okay, so I'm just going to read here. So Mr. Fisher's life, it's shown to be dull. The fact that Mr. Fisher once dreamed so fiercely of writing of his story. However, this does not anymore. Okay, good. So Shreya, you once again, you've got some good points there. Okay, a bit more. Is nice. Wanting, making his life dull. Good, 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 good. So let me see. Let me just have a look again. Again, if you're seeing me read, I'm just reading some of the comments with responses to the questions. So sorry, I'm quiet and reading. So that's a good response. I'm gonna have a look at it again as we do the next one, okay? Because I can't Um, I've got something to say, but I can't formulate it straight away. But I will come back to this. Okay. But you've made some good points so far. But I'll be more specific in a minute. Okay. So we've got one more. Okay. One more, and then that's it. So the final one, we've got 3 points. Okay. 3 points filled with obligation and duty, uninspiring and disappointing. Okay. And 3 quotes as well. Okay, so you can either focus on one of them, use the other things to support it. It's up to you how you do it. But again, we're looking for layers in meaning, embedded quotations, supporting your point with more than one quote, and you've got plenty to pick from there. Offer both word level and wider analysis, and consider alternative interpretations of the same idea. Okay, so I'll put 5 minutes starting now. Whilst you do that, Shreya, I'll reread your comments so I can give you better feedback. Okay, 5 minutes have started. Go. Okay, we're halfway through the final paragraph for today. Halfway through, so 2.5 minutes left. Okay, 5 minutes is up. So Shrey, I'm just going to say a bit more about what you've written. So again, you've made some good points. Just be careful that you're not being repetitive, okay? Because where you said the word fiercely has connotations of passion and energy, which is lacking in his life when described previously in the extract. So you've made that point. And then in your next sentence, you're kind of making the same point. You say there's an emphasis of difference, okay? And then everything else you say after that is kind of repeating the same point, okay? So just be careful of that so that you can be using maybe that time to analyze something else. For example, with the magic had run out, you could maybe use that time to zoom in on something there instead. So just be careful that you're not being repetitive, okay? Even in your explanation. But apart from that, it's good. And then when you said the passive movement, just have to be a bit clearer about what you mean by that. I'm not sure what that means. But yeah. Okay, so for the one that's on the screen, the example for that could be, additionally, Mr. Fisher's life is portrayed as marked with a sense of obligation because of his devotion to duty. The noun devotion has religious connotations, suggesting a sense of loyalty to his work, rooted in principles in principles as opposed to passion or enthusiasm. Similarly, his students lack enthusiasm for what he teaches them, as conveyed with the repetition of was boring in the epistrophe. I think that should say highlighting his lack of ability to inspire despite his devotion. This suggests that Mr. Fisher is in a repetitive cycle of dullness and disappointment. All this is seen to contribute to his crippling sense of terrible disillusionment. This noun phrase highlights the sense of disappointment currently dominating Mr. Fisher's life. Okay, so that's what you could have written. That's not the only thing you could have written. As you've demonstrated today, you've got great ideas yourself. So again, any paragraphs, you can add them in. But so far, it's been really good. It's been a high quality of analysis. So you're definitely on the right track. And I think sometimes, like I mentioned there with being repetitive, sometimes it's just the case of if you're writing in it, with time constrictions, that can happen. So you just check, read over your work and check. Okay, so that's, the full response. Now, you probably won't need to, and depending on the question, how many marks it is, you probably need to write at least 2 paragraphs. But again, it's exam board specific. So we've written 3 paragraphs today, but depending on which exam board you're with, how many marks it's worth, and how long you have to spend on it, that would depend on how many paragraphs. So I can't actually tell you that, this is how many paragraphs you need to write, because I need to know what exam board you're with. And again, if you're interested in any of my exam board specific lessons, you can send me an email about that. So, okay, sure, you've got another one. I'll have a look at yours. So the author presents Mr. Fisher's life as centered around his work. Good. Mentioned that he lives alone. One way this is pushed mine. Good. Even though he may not want to teach English anymore, the author also presents Mr. Fisher's life as centered. He still does it because he feels this shows what kind of person he is, teaching for the better. Another way he's presented is disappointed. Okay, you've got really good explanations there. But now what's happened is, so you've mentioned the phrase, good, devotion to duty. And then you've explained that. You've mentioned terrible disillusionment and the magic had run out. And then you mentioned again, dreamed so fiercely, but be careful because 3 of those quotes, you haven't talked about what language techniques are used in that paragraph. You've done it before, but in this particular paragraph, you've got a lot of great examples and your explanations are accurate. They're good as well. They're sound and they make sense with everything that you're saying. However, you've dropped your terminology, so just be careful not to do that. And again, if you just point to, this phrase, this adjective, or the magic had run out, that metaphor. Okay, so great analysis again, but just be careful to maintain your focus on the subject terminology. But those are really good explanations, really good, and it's a focused analysis, I would say there. New comments, okay. But yes, so that's it for today. So do you have, if you've got any questions, again, you can ask them. If you've enjoyed today, please like. If you've benefited from what we've done today, then just please like this video, and keep an eye out for more Wednesday webinars. My page, Lanai the Tutor, on Facebook, I'll be updating that with any upcoming webinars, so keep an eye out for that. And thank you for joining. And if you're watching this as a replay, thank you for watching. If you've got any questions or any you want any feedback, just leave your paragraphs in the comments and I can do that as well. So yes, well done, and thank you for watching. Bye.